All right, welcome to part 3 of me filling out the bracket, the perfect bracket. This is what we're looking at so far. I've got it filled up to the Sweet 16. I'm going to try to do the Sweet 16 and down to my champion in this part. If not, it'll be part 4. Make sure you subscribe, go back and watch part 1 and part 2 to see how we got to where we are now. But I'm going to start with the Sweet 16. As I said, no time to waste. Starting Sweet 16 in the South, Auburn versus Texas A&M. If you saw part 2, you saw my rant about Texas A&M. I have not been high on them at all this season. Last time these two teams played, Texas A&M did beat Auburn somehow. It was in Texas A&M, which definitely helped them out. But now that we're in the NCAA tournament, Auburn fully healthy. They're coming off of a couple losses at the end of the regular season and in the SEC tournament. I mean, this one's tough for me. Obviously, Auburn, one of the best teams in the country. They got that #1 overall seed in the tournament. A&M, every video I've said, everybody will tell you they're a really good rebounding team, especially offensively. That definitely helped in their victory versus Auburn earlier in the year, and it's going to help them in this tournament. Again, I'm not completely sold that A&M is going to get past Yale or Michigan or UC San Diego in round 1 or round 2. But I do believe they can make it to the Sweet 16. Auburn, though, I mean, they're just too good, offensively too good. Going to go with Auburn up here. Give me the Tigers over the Aggies. Iowa State versus Marquette. If this happens to be the matchup in the Sweet 16 in the South, I think this is a really good matchup. Must-see TV, like I said in the past videos. Iowa State has definitely had its up and downs this season. But, I mean, same with Marquette. But Shaka Smart, Marquette versus TJ Otzelberger and the Iowa State Cyclones. I think it's going to be a good game. I think it's going to come down to the defenses for both teams. Coming into the season, I thought Iowa State would be an elite defensive team. They've been known the last couple years more for its defense than its offense. Marquette, usually a more offensive-powered team. Cam Jones having a little bit of a down year this season. But this could also be Michigan State in this position, who a lot of people are taking for a deep run this year. I'm not completely sold on them, even though they are a very, very solid team offensively and defensively. Marquette, I like them though. Watch them in the Big East tournament, even though they didn't win it. Obviously, they play hard. I think they have what it takes to be a really good offensive team while staying disciplined and solid on defense. That's what it's going to take to beat Michigan State or Iowa State if they make it that far. Oh, man. Well, I'm just going to do it anyways. Marquette is going to beat Iowa State in the Sweet 16 to advance to the Elite 8. That might be crazy, but you got to be a little bit crazy with your brackets. Florida versus Memphis, two teams coming into Selection Sunday. I said I have to take them deep. Florida might end up being my national champion. If you saw on TikTok or Instagram, you know that already. But Memphis, another team that I wanted to take deep. Maryland could also be in this position, which I think would still be a good matchup versus Florida. But Florida versus Memphis, as I mentioned in part 2, the over, if these two teams match up, just close your eyes, bet on the over no matter what. It's going to be a really good offensive game, but when it's all said and done, you're going to need a little bit of defense, cause a little bit of turnovers, and I think Florida is just built like that. Those dudes are just different on this team this year. I knew coming into it I was going to take Florida far, so I can't stop now, obviously. Florida over Memphis in the Sweet 16 to advance to the Elite 8. In the West, Texas Tech versus Kansas. If this was a regular season game, you're betting on Texas Tech. But I said coming into it, as I've said everywhere on my social media and both parts of this bracket video, I'm taking Kansas deep. They might not beat Arkansas in round 1, and then they got a tough matchup round 2 versus St. John's, which in that game, if I'm going to continue this trend, praying that Omaha somehow beats St. John's in round 1, which I don't think will happen. But the Johnnies versus Kansas in the second round, I took Kansas. It's written, pen to paper, it's official. Now they match up with Texas Tech, which honestly I like that matchup better than St. John's. I think Texas Tech is better than St. John's, but just because they're in the same conference. Kansas played really well against Texas Tech in the Big 12 tournament. If they just have a repeat of that performance, A.J. Storr shows up big again. Zeke Mayo contributes. Badunga off the bench. DeJuan Harris needs to have a clean game, like no turnovers, and just, because I think he's capable of being a really good point guard. He's safe with the ball, a very good passer. He's got that experience. Texas Tech, I would also want to take pretty deep in this tournament, but just the way that they're matched up here. I'm continuing the trend. Kansas Jayhawks are going to beat Texas Tech in the Sweet 16, advance to the Elite Eight to face my favorite in the tournament, Florida. This east side of the bracket is a little wacky for me. Currently, we got Duke versus Liberty in the Sweet 16. Don't really know the status on Cooper Flagg. I'm sure we will as we get closer to the actual tournament. But even without them, I think they're easily going to win that round one game, probably by at least 30 points. A little bit of a tougher game versus Baylor in the second round, which if they don't have Flagg for that game, it could be a little closer, but I still think Duke will win. Then they face Liberty, hopefully, because I'm shooting for a perfect bracket this year, of course. Duke versus Liberty in the Sweet 16 might be a little crazy just seeing the word Liberty on that line. But again, Duke, one of the best teams in the country. I thought they could have snuck away with that number one overall seed, but might not be an easy win for Duke just because it is March Madness. But I can see them handling business versus Liberty. Now, this little section of the bracket, I ended up with Wisconsin versus Alabama. If you saw part two, I had a hell of a time trying to decide between VCU and Wisconsin just because BYU's floating around in there too, and I know they're capable of making a deep run. But I had VCU versus Wisconsin in the second round, Wisconsin prevailing in that one. Sweet 16 matching up versus Alabama. I think both of these teams capable of getting to the Elite Eight, possibly a Final Four. And it is tough not really knowing the status of Cooper Flagg for Duke and knowing how far to take them or who they're going to be playing against. But Wisconsin versus Bama, I think these are two completely different teams. Wisconsin, slower, more patient on offense. Bama, they get a rebound or inbound. They go, shoot within the first 10 seconds of the shot clock. If Wisconsin gets too far behind, like they're down double digits at any point in the game, it's going to be really tough for them to get back into the game just because of the way Alabama plays. Mark Sears, haven't even mentioned his name yet in these videos. Obviously, he's experienced, really good point guard. Grant Nelson, I said it ever since he transferred to Bama last year. He's an NBA-type player. He had probably the best game of his career versus Auburn a couple weeks ago. He showed up big in the tournament last year, especially versus North Carolina. And I think he's going to show up big again in this tournament. He's just a good player. Bama's a good team overall. I mean, if they don't shoot the ball well, they can get themselves into some trouble. Wisconsin, I mean, they're just that solid team, good on offense. They're efficient on offense. They play at a slower pace. They can make foul shots, which plays a big role in March Madness. This one's just tough for me. Wisconsin versus Bama. The winner of this will play Duke in the Elite Eight in the eastern side of the bracket. I mean, this is why it takes me 3 days to fill out a bracket. I can't make a decision. So many scenarios just run through my head. Tonje is going to have to score 35-plus points in this game for Wisconsin to win. And I don't want to be too obvious by taking Duke the 1 seed, Bama the 2 seed, even though I got some crazier things around the bracket. But, I mean, yeah, we're doing it. Bama's just too good. Bama's beating Wisconsin in the Sweet 16, the face-off against Duke. Now we move to the Midwest. A little bit of crazier region for me. I got Gonzaga beating Houston to get to the Sweet 16. Gonzaga going up against Clemson. I'm going to be short and sweet with this one. I think Gonzaga's got the size. Ryan Nembhard, their point guard. Clemson plays at a little bit of a slower pace, but is capable of turning it up at times. Gonzaga, though, if you speed them up, they can still fill up the bucket, score a lot, score quickly. Nembhard, I think he is a great point guard. I mean, there's not a whole lot of other guards in the country that I would want on my team when it comes to March Madness time. He doesn't turn the ball over. He can score, pass to teammates, one of the leaders in assists, one of the leaders in assist-turnover ratio. Like I said, he can score when he needs to. Super confident, experienced player. Gonzaga, I mean, they can burn me if they lose early on, but I'm taking the Zags over Clemson to get into the Elite Eight. Final Sweet 16 game, Kentucky versus Tennessee, another SEC matchup. It's been the best conference in college basketball, arguably one of the best conferences in the history of the sport. Kentucky, basically a new team this year, a lot of transfers, new head coach Mark Pope coming over from BYU. Tennessee, another really solid season, made it to the SEC championship. They're always known as a defensive team, but I think its offense has really elevated this year. Like I mentioned, Ziegler, Chaz Lanier he was the SEC Newcomer of the Year, definitely making a big difference for this team. Kentucky, one of the best offenses in the country. I think they finished 5th in points per game in D1. You just can't ignore that. They got shooters. I didn't even mention Otega Oweh, the transfer from Oklahoma. Him, Kobe Brea, Lamont Butler, Andrew Carr, Amari Williams. I mean, that's just a solid lineup all the way through for them. I don't know if they're capable of making like a Final Four run, but I also don't know if Gonzaga is a Final Four type team. I think Tennessee is more built to make a Final Four, possibly a championship run, but I mean, there's going to be a lot of SEC teams here as we come down towards the championship, obviously. Man, tough pickings here. Kentucky versus Tennessee, without a doubt, it'll be a good matchup just because they're two SEC opponents. They faced each other before. Who will match up versus Gonzaga in the Elite Eight? I am going to have to go with... I'm going with Kentucky. The way that Otega Oweh has played the last month or two of the season has been nuts. Kobe Brea, you pass him the ball, you let him shoot threes. I just think they're going to outwork Tennessee. Give me Kentucky in the Elite Eight. Here is the Elite Eight: Auburn, Marquette, Florida, Kansas, Duke, Alabama, Gonzaga, and Kentucky. I'm running out of breath. My brain hurts, but we have made it to the Elite Eight. This is crunch time now. Critical decisions must be made. Continuing on, starting in the South, Auburn versus Marquette. Marquette wasn't really on my radar coming into this tournament as being a sleeper team, but I like the matchups that they're being dealt with. I think they'll win that round one if they get over Michigan State, who I think will be a challenge for them, but I think they match up well with Michigan State. It's going to be a tough game versus Iowa State, but Iowa State, I've seen their highs, I've seen their lows. I think Marquette, mostly because it's March Madness, they could pull out a game like that. I'm a big Cam Jones fan. At the beginning of the year, I thought he would have his name in there for Player of the Year, but they now face Auburn, who last year I took to win it all. As we know, they lost round one to Yale, of course, so it's kind of tough for me to pick them to go far again, even though they are arguably the best team in the country. But 2018, when Virginia lost to UMBC, I took them to win it all, obviously losing in that first round, but the next year that didn't scare me. I took them to win it all that year, and they did it, so that kind of helps me with my Auburn situation. In this game, the Elite Eight versus Marquette, I just think Auburn is just too good of a team. If Marquette goes into one of those slumps offensively, it's going to be game over for them. So, surprise, surprise, I'm sure everybody in the world has this except for those crazy people. Give me Auburn in the Final Four. I'm not known to put all 1 seeds or all 1s and a 2 seed in the Final Four. I'm liking the way this is shaping up so far. Auburn, I just can't not put them in the Final Four. If you watch my favorites video on this channel, you hear me talk about all the good things that they do well. They barely do anything poorly. They can shoot, play defense, rebound. They have depth, everything. So, I mean, I have no choice but to put them in the Final Four. And it's looking like my Kansas Cinderella run might come to an end here. They're facing Florida down in the West in the Elite Eight. Coming into this, I said Florida, a real shot at winning it all. I also said Kansas has a good shot, or at least I think, to make a deep run. I just think Florida has been playing unreal. They are built for March, built for this tournament, and I think this game they might end up blowing out Kansas. So, without further ado, give me an SEC matchup in the Final Four between Auburn and Florida. Over to the East, Duke, Alabama. I think this will be a really good game, one of the best of the tournament here in this Elite Eight matchup. I mean, if Cooper Flagg is healthy, which at this point, if they make it, if they get out to big, I don't think he's going to play in that round 1 game versus American or Mount St. Mary's, whatever it is. Yeah, I think they'll just rest him for that game. They have the team and quality of players to blow out whatever team ends up getting that 16 seed. And if they get out to big leads versus who I have, Baylor or Liberty or any of the other teams, if they get out to big leads, Cooper Flag is going to be on the bench, rest up for the next round. So I'm just going to predict that by the Elite Eight, if they get there, they will be fully healthy. But a matchup versus Bama, there's not a lot of teams out there capable of beating Duke. Bama, I think, is built for it. Duke, a good three-point shooting team, a good defensive team. They can rebound, but Bama can also do all those things. Here we go. Might be a hot take, might not be a hot take, but it's going to be Bama versus Duke in the Elite Eight, and here's what's going to happen. The fast-paced nature of the Alabama Crimson Tide and just how aggressive they are on defense, it is going to get to Cooper Flag and Con Knipple, the two freshmen. Not saying the light's going to be too bright for them, but I just think Bama's going to be too aggressive, too physical, just running up and down the floor. It's going to be too much for those two freshmen. Tyrese Proctor is just not going to shoot the ball well. He's going to exert too much energy on defense. Same with guys like Zion James and Caleb Foster coming off of the bench. I just think Bama is going to be too fast. They're going to outwork Duke. Nate Oates, one of the best coaches in the country. All the analytics and the numbers that run through his head and his fancy suits that he wears every game. I think he's going to get it together. A lot of people are going to take Duke to be the national champion, but it's going to come down to the Elite Eight versus Alabama, and Bama is going to beat Duke and advance to the Final Four. Now looking at it, I have 3 teams from the SEC in the Final Four, but I mean, they have been 3 of the best teams in the country throughout the entire season from start to finish, so can't be too upset about that. You got 2 1 seeds, a 2 seed, and now I'm left in the Midwest with Gonzaga or Kentucky. Do I put 4 SEC teams in the Final Four? I feel like that's an absolute crazy thing to do. But like I said before, you got to be a little bit crazy with what you do on your bracket. I mean, I low-key like Gonzaga versus Kentucky. Obviously, the big hump for Gonzaga to get over would be Houston in that second round. And if I don't pick Houston or Tennessee throughout this Midwest section, those teams could easily also make a Final Four run, I think. But I low-key like Gonzaga in this matchup versus Kentucky. 2 high-powered offenses. Comes down to a team with a bunch of transfers and a new head coach going against Gonzaga with one of the best point guards in the country in Ryan Nembhard, who can control the pace, control the game, really make it look how he wants it to look. Gonzaga an 8 seed, but I mean, they've got experience. Mark Few has been there a bunch of times, really never able to get over that hump for a while now, really, making it to a championship, similar to Arizona and Houston. Oh boy, my decision. This is a little bit wild. I didn't really see it shaping up like this, but Gonzaga, put them in the Final Four. The offense and the rebounding is just going to be too much for Kentucky. The Gonzaga Bulldogs are going to the Final Four, mostly in part to Ryan Nembhard and Mark Few. I mean, they got the big guys down low to rebound, to play defense. They can score down low in the paint. You get Amari Williams in foul trouble, try to get him out of the game. But, oh boy, this is a little bit nuts for me, but I like it. I'm sticking with it. Final Four, Auburn, Florida, Bama, Gonzaga. There you have it. Those teams are going to San Antonio. All right, I'm keeping it here. Screw a part 4. I'm down to the Final Four. Here's what the bracket looks like right now. Take it in, soak it in, look at those upsets, look at those crazy picks. But I'm now down to my 4 teams that are going to San Antonio. 3 of them from the SEC, Auburn, Florida, and Alabama. And then we got Gonzaga, the 8 seed, down at the bottom of the bracket in the Midwest in the Final Four. Call me crazy, call it cliche that 3 out of my 4 Final Four teams are from the SEC. It has been the best conference in college basketball. Ask anybody, any casual will know that. I don't want to count, but the SEC has 10 teams that made the tournament. And Auburn, Florida, Bama, they have been 3 of the best teams in the country. I think they get good matchups throughout this tournament as the bracket unfolds, especially the way that I have it playing out. But, I mean, it is a little scary taking that many teams from one conference, but they've been the best conference all year, and I think March Madness is where they get to prove it. I mean, Duke could beat Alabama there in the Elite Eight, but like I said, just go back and watch that little rant. Good reasons for Bama to win that game. I think it could be Kentucky or Tennessee down in the Midwest, but I'm taking Gonzaga to prevail. Auburn versus Florida, the 2-1 seeds. This is going to be a really good game. Once again, I mean, two of the best teams in the country coming into the bracket. Florida was my team. People were asking me. People were throwing out Houston, Duke. Florida, of course, people are going to take them, but I've been on them all season. Offensively, they're top 10 in points per game. That backcourt, I can't stress it enough. Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Will Richard. I mean, just one of the best backcourts in the country. Ruben Chinyelu, Alex Condon, down low. They played well in the SEC tournament. Condon, I think, is on a lot of people's radars now of just actually how good he is. Auburn, we know they're experienced. They're basically older than the Oklahoma City Thunder. Bruce Pearl's an absolute psychopath, but that's what you need in a team, especially in the tournament. They're so energized, intense, aggressive. I said it in my favorites video up on this channel that I posted last week. I mean, they are just nuts to play against. But I think Florida has what it takes. Auburn, a good three-point shooting team. They take a lot of threes. Florida, a lot of people might not know, they're one of the best teams at defending the three-point line, one of the best teams at shooting the three-pointer. So I think we're going to see that in this game. Florida shutting down Auburn outside of the arc. They have the size and shot blockers down low to stop Broom and people driving to the hoop. So I'm just sticking with my gut from before the brackets came out. Florida is going to be in the national championship. Oh man, I'm going to pass out. Bama versus Gonzaga in the Final Four. Gonzaga obviously going to have to go on a little bit of a Cinderella run to pull this one out, but I think they're capable of doing that. Bama, one of the best teams in the country. I would be horrified to play against them, coach against them. Setting up a game plan against them has to be one of the hardest things to do. And Gonzaga is going to bring it on offense. So Bama's going to have to match that, show up, score early, score often, and that's usually not a problem for Bama. I think if you're just looking at the two offenses, Bama is better than Gonzaga. Defensively, I just think they're going to cause panic. This might be the game where Ryan Nembhard gets sped up, has a couple turnovers, doesn't have a great game. Mark Sears is a good on-ball defender, and like size-wise, him and Nembhard are basically the same, so it's not like Sears is going out there and guarding a 6'5" guard. Nembhard, 6'1", whatever it is. So that's a good matchup there. SEC has been the best conference this season in college basketball. Said it 25,000 times, but I think we're going to end up with an SEC championship. Florida already in for me. I just don't think Gonzaga has what it takes to make it to the championship this year. I believe in them enough to make it to the Final Four. Watching them in the WCC tournament, they played really well. Just reminded me how good Ryan Nembhard is. But I don't think they have what it takes to beat Alabama. So your national championship matchup is going to be Florida versus Alabama. Two of the best going head-to-head. The moment we've all been waiting for. Who is going to be your national champion in 2025? I have the Florida Gators or the Alabama Crimson Tide. Todd Golden, the quarter zip wearing 25-year-old looking head coach versus Nate Oates, always styling in his suits on the court. One of the best coaches in the country. Who's it going to be? Two of the best offenses in the country. I think Florida, when you watch them and look at them, better on the defensive side of the ball versus Alabama. But, I mean, this is going to be a shootout of a game. If this is actually the championship game, it's going to be one hell of a game. You can't deny that. I'll be rooting for it, obviously, because I haven't written on my paper. But if it comes down to these two teams, Florida versus Alabama, SEC opponents, based off my observations the last couple weeks, got to watch some good ball from both of these teams. A lot of teams playing well that kind of snuck up on me and wanted me to take them deep in this tournament. But I just think them Florida Gators, man, they have been playing way too well. Both sides of the floor, offense, defense, shooting the ball, defending on the perimeter. They have it all. Walter Clayton's going to drop 30 points in this game. The Florida Gators are going to be your national champions. They had some undefeated seasons years ago. I think this team might be just as good, even though they're not undefeated. Shout out Scotty Wilbekin. There's a poll for you. I just think Florida is really good. Bama, I could see Duke in this game as well, or maybe Tennessee. But Florida from that left side, I think they're advancing to the final. They're going to win the final. Your NCAA March Madness tournament champion, Florida Gators. Mark it down if you want that perfect bracket. This is the one to follow. All right, I need to eat something. I need a drink. I am exhausted. My brain hurts from filling that out. That is the perfect NCAA March Madness bracket. Copy my picks exactly how they are if you want. Tweak a little things. Comment below your national champion. I did all this work for you guys. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. I hope in a month's time we can come back and look at this as evidence of just how much knowledge I have and how perfect my bracket really ends up being.